Actually, kind of a fun story. I joined a band called Supervillain. Um, don't look for them. We had like 2 gigs and broke up immediately. But everybody there had to have a supervillain name, so it was like Dr. Octagon or whatever. And I had just started, I'd been working here previously as an engineer, but they started giving me professor work. So I, when I was at rehearsal, I was on a mic stand, I was flinging it around, the bottom of the mic stand flew off, went across the room, smacked into like an amp, smashed some shit, and I am like, I am Professor Damage. Professor Damage. I was talking about myself in the third person, and that ended up sticking. Believe me, in hindsight, if I had thought of a better fake name for myself, I would have come up with something better. But it's kind of settled for the past 25 years. So yeah, they'll be chiseling that into my gravestone. The music really, the inspiration for anything that I do is really what I can do. As an artist, I try to create as much as possible. If I can give any advice to, artists, just keep creating. Whatever it is that you can do. And I don't really work with a plan. It's whatever I can do. So if I'm working with Gods of Fire, that one I joined a band. Like they were Gods of Fire before me. They had 2 other singers, who I'm amazed I replaced. I mean, one guy was like in the touring company of Godspell and shit. Like this guy was good. So basically that came to me, and they would hand me the songs, and like I have nothing to do with the writing of the music in that band. So they give me a song, and I'm like, that's about a werewolf. And I'm like, okay, it's metal, it's kind of epic, and that type of shit. And I was like, oh, what do metal people like? Monsters. Okay, I'm a monster guy. I teach a monster class. Let me make every song about the Twilight Zone episodes. I've never wanted to do anything but be in a band. The reason I got in it, which is, for those of you who know me as the guy who works at the school teaching film, the reason I got into it was because in my mind, in the, Vince's, 15-year-old mind back in the 80s, he saw Van Halen on TV with a music video, and he thought, Eddie Van Halen and David Lee Roth were running around with cameras making their own video. Like, it didn't connect to me that they didn't do that. So I was like, well, yeah, I'll make songs and then make movies of me in the song. And that's where I kind of made that happen, and I've been doing that ever since, like, sometimes for myself, sometimes for other artists, but it's, I love the idea of visual with a song. Like sometimes I'll write the song purposely knowing what the visual is going to be. My favorite rock and roll moment, I was with a band called Jersey Turnpike Overdrive. We were playing the Hoover Hootenanny out in Asbury Park. And basically the Hoover Hootenanny was this big backyard party that everybody in Asbury was going to. They just packed this place with like a few hundred people, right? And he would bring everybody in there. It was punk bands, jazz bands, magicians, comedians, whoever would show up, they get on stage. So I've done this a few times, and Hoover comes up to me, and I see a bus pull up, and it's a something like a 48-piece gospel choir, 48-member gospel choir. They pulled up, they're doing the show, and he goes, Vince, I want you to open. And at that time we were doing like MC5. I don't know if any of your viewers know MC5. Because they start off a certain way. We were doing like an MC5 show. I was like, okay, you know what I do, right? He's like, yeah. I was like, and what they're going to hear? He's like, yeah, I know. So it's like, okay, great. Get on stage. I grab the mic. And the opening for MC5's Kick Out the Jams starts out with, brothers and sisters, I gotta tell you, it is now time for each and every one of you to kick out the jams, motherfuckers! And it was great, because like, as soon as I said brothers and sisters, they all went, oh, we know that. We're a gospel choir, they're all, those cats, right? It's funny, they had the flyers that said the world will end, and they were like 3 years out of date. It was like the world will end in 2012. It's like, well, it's 2015. Why? Got to get new flyers. And it was great because, and it wasn't offending them. That was the best part, because that was kind of cool. I just love when people are listening to my music like this, which happens, and or just everybody like grabbing their kids and stuff, and they're moving stuff over. And then we went out and played MC5. It was a cover band situation. I was playing Little Richard. I was playing Chuck Berry. Rock and roll. Loud, fast rock and roll. Two little girls come up to us. And, the kid must have been 12. One was 12, one was 15. It was their sister. Like, it looked like they saw fucking aliens land. And they were like, what is this music you're playing? And I was like, it's rock and roll, my dear. And it's like a whole world. I saw their whole world just, they had been listening to gospel, which rock and roll is based on. But they heard it in a new, loud, raucous way. And I was like, that's why I'm here. That person that just wasn't expecting it, and it made me, I guess it's kind of like teaching. You see that light bulb go off in somebody, and it's like, rock and roll, that. If I was a preacher, I would be the preacher of rock and roll. Rock and roll is my religion. It informs, if religion is what informs you and what drives you and what motivates you, then rock and roll is my religion. That's what gets me out of bed. That's what makes me do things, whether I get paid for them or not. So, that's it. That was like one of the best rock and roll moments of my life.